The Constitution and the Republic it established are not self-running machines. Both depend on the character of the people and leaders who operate them. The founders knew the Republic they built had a hidden dependency. John Adams stated it plainly in 1798.
Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other.
Adams was not prescribing a denomination. He was describing the ethical, moral, and civil foundation necessary to govern well. Benjamin Franklin arrived at the same conclusion by a different road. Franklin was the least conventionally religious of the major founders. He built his own system entirely from reason. The founders understood this, and they wrote it down. Books, pamphlets, letters, rules of conduct. The republic they built had a hidden dependency. Its ability to endure required those who operated it to be people of character. The founders believed character had to be built, deliberately, without illusion about how hard that was. As a teenager, George Washington hand-copied 110 rules of civility. While it may have started as a penmanship exercise, he spent the rest of his life living by them.
Rule 1. Every action done in company ought to be with some sign of respect to those that are present. Rule 65. Speak not injurious words, neither in jest nor earnest. Scoff at none, although they give occasion.
Benjamin Franklin went further. Having resolved to pursue moral perfection, he realized he needed a concrete way to map his progress. He identified 13 specific virtues required for the task. To track them, he constructed a small notebook with a page for each one. He cycled through them systematically, focusing on one primary virtue each week, repeating the entire course 4 times a year for decades, and recording a dot for every daily failure. He never achieved perfection. He said so himself with characteristic honesty. But he wrote that by the endeavor he was a better and happier man than he otherwise would have been. John Adams understood the standard as well as any founder, and he also understood how difficult it was to meet. His explosive temper was his acknowledged liability. He knew it, his friends knew it, his political opponents weaponized it against him. Yet Adams never stopped insisting that mastering oneself was entirely necessary to sustain a free republic. Thomas Jefferson translated this conviction into an institution. In 1802, as president, he signed the act establishing the United States Military Academy at West Point. Jefferson had once been skeptical of a standing professional military. He feared a European-style officer class whose loyalties might drift from the republic they served. What he built instead was an institution whose founding premise was that an officer's character is a primary consideration. When Superintendent Douglas MacArthur finally committed the century-old understanding to paper in 1922, it became 22 words. A cadet will not lie, cheat, steal, nor tolerate those who do. At West Point, that code sets the compliance floor. But the spirit of the code demands something higher. It rejects the shortcuts, the loopholes, and the exploitation of legal technicalities. People of high character do not just fulfill a code in form. They meet it in spirit and apply its intent to new situations and circumstances. They live by both what it says and what it means. The founders understood that those who hold public office are stewards of power, not its owners, temporary custodians of something that must endure long after them. Their every act in office shapes the inheritance they leave behind. Benjamin Rush, physician, educator, and signer of the Declaration of Independence, stated the governing principle plainly, quote, "Without virtue there can be no liberty, and liberty is the object and life of all republican governments." End quote. The sequence matters. Virtue first, liberty follows. George Washington gave that principle its most visible demonstration. In December of 1783, with the Revolutionary War won, he resigned his commission as commander of the Continental Army and went home. He did not have to. He could have kept the army. He stepped down anyway, because he understood that the republic he had helped build was not his to keep. His power had been borrowed from the people. He returned it, and he would do so again at the end of his presidency. The founders had a name for what Washington demonstrated. They called it disinterestedness, not a lack of interest, but freedom from self-interest in the exercise of public power. Without it, every other virtue a leader possessed could be bent toward private ambition. With it, even imperfect leaders could serve something larger than themselves. The founders did not merely hope leaders would practice disinterestedness. They wrote protections against self-dealing directly into the Constitution. The two emoluments clauses prohibit office holders from accepting personal financial benefits from foreign or domestic governments beyond their fixed salary. Public office must not be a vehicle for private enrichment. The mechanism was real, not merely theoretical. When Benjamin Franklin served as American minister to France, King Louis XVI presented him with a jeweled snuff box, an elaborate diplomatic gift worth a significant sum. Franklin did not simply keep it. He went to Congress and asked permission. Congress granted it. The clause formalized exactly that practice, transparency and accountability built into the acceptance of any benefit from a foreign power. Stewardship also extends to institutions. James Madison warned in Federalist 62 that continual change, even of good measures, is inconsistent with every rule of prudence. Great leaders understood they were stewards of a longer continuum, not owners of a prize they had won. Thomas Jefferson believed that human beings possess something he called moral sense, an innate faculty present in every person that perceives right from wrong the way the eye perceives light. He made it operational. In the University of Virginia, founded in 1819 after decades of effort, he built an institution designed to sharpen that faculty and direct it toward the public good. Moral sense and the education to refine it are not, by themselves, enough. Leading with truth also requires transparency, and it requires creating conditions where honest counsel can reach those in power. A leader surrounded only by people afraid to say what they actually think is a leader making decisions in the dark. Washington himself modeled this directly. He assembled a cabinet of men who fundamentally disagreed. Jefferson and Hamilton rarely aligned on anything. He sought their written opinions separately, required plain speech, and listened to counsel that challenged his own instincts. Jefferson would later distill this standard, moral sense, honest counsel, and transparency, into a single sentence in a letter to his grandson in 1810. We will hear that from Jefferson shortly. Civility is not politeness theater. It is not the absence of disagreement or the pretense that differences do not exist. The founders disagreed with each other constantly, sometimes bitterly, sometimes in ways that ended friendships and cost careers. What civility meant to them was something harder and more demanding than manners. It meant choosing to engage rather than dismiss, to treat the person across the argument as someone whose view deserved a hearing, even when you were certain they were wrong. Washington understood this as a discipline to be practiced, not a temperament to be born with. Washington's Rule 86 put it plainly.
In disputes, be not so desirous to overcome as not to give liberty to each other to deliver his opinion and submit to the judgment of the major part.
He wrote that as a teenager, he practiced it as a general, as a president, and as a private citizen who watched with grief as the factions he had warned against tore at the republic he had helped build. The most striking example in the founding generation is not a success story. It is a rupture, and then a repair. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson had been essential partners in the founding. Adams helped secure independence. Jefferson wrote the Declaration. They served together, disagreed, fell into bitter political rivalry, and did not speak for more than a decade. The breach seemed permanent. It was Benjamin Rush, a friend to both men, who brokered their reconciliation. He told each of them he had dreamed of their renewed friendship. Adams wrote first in January of 1812. Jefferson replied. Over the following 14 years, they exchanged more than 150 letters on philosophy, on history, on the republic they had built together, and the fears they shared about its future. Both men ultimately chose engagement over dismissal. The republic they had served together outlasted the bitterest argument between two of its architects. The founders were not idealists who believed good leaders would simply emerge from good intentions. They were careful, historically literate men who had watched republics fail. They wrote about character because they believed it was the variable that determined whether everything else they had built would hold. They wrote it in letters, pamphlets, and published books. They argued about it across decades and across the ruptures of political rivalry. They built an institution at West Point whose founding premise was that character could be cultivated, deliberately, systematically, in the leaders the republic would depend on. The founders believed in leading with honor, ethics, and civility. They wrote about governing oneself, servant leadership, creating space for honest counsel, and engaging disagreement with courage rather than contempt. They built institutions to cultivate these principles. They lived by them imperfectly and said so honestly, because they understood that the attempt itself was what the Republic required. Thomas Jefferson, in a letter to his grandson in 1810, left a standard for maintaining one's moral sense, simple enough to carry in memory and demanding enough to last a lifetime.
Whenever you are to do a thing, though it can never be known but to yourself, ask yourself how you would act were all the world looking at you, and act accordingly.
That standard does not belong to Jefferson alone. It belongs to every person who has ever held a public trust, and to every citizen who decides who that person will be. The question they left us is the one this republic asks in every generation. Do the people asking for your vote lead with honor, ethics, and civility?
The founders left us more than a constitution. Their counsel shaped a nation, and it may yet help us navigate what's ahead. If you agree, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.